Il Conformista by Bernardo Bertolucci.
Il cuore senza alcun dottore.
Sei proprio deciso allora? Ma che ti aspetti dal matrimonio?
Vedi, l'impressione della normalità.
La normalità.
Sì, la stabilità, la sicurezza. La mattina mentre mi vesto, mi guardo nello specchio e mi sembra che la mia immagine sia diversa da quella di tutti gli altri.
Ma che ti piace in Giulia?
Non so, forse il suo corpo, la sensualità.
Sì, e lei?
Tutte le volte che ci troviamo soli subito mi salta addosso.
E poi?
Finiamo sempre sul tappeto a rotolarci.
E la servetta con le tettone?
Ah, fa parte del corredo.
Così tu ti sposi, io perdo il mio migliore amico, ma sono contento.
L'amor gioca sempre col cuore l'eterna partita.
2 minuti, signoritolo.
Sei sicuro che verrà?
Il colonnello? Ma sì, verrà, vedrai che verrà. Me l'ha promesso. È molto interessato. Ma cerca di stare calmo. È strano però, sai, tutti vorrebbero sembrare diversi dagli altri e tu invece vuoi somigliare a tutti.
Una decina d'anni fa mio padre era a Monaco. Mi ha raccontato che spesso la sera dopo il teatro andava con gli amici in una birreria e c'era uno squilibrato un po' buffo che parlava di politica. Era diventata un'attrazione. Gli pagavano da bere, le citavano. E lui saliva su un tavolo e faceva dei discorsi da pazzo furioso. Era Hitler.
Abbiamo trasmesso Chi è più felice di me, di Cesare Andrea Bixio. È terminato il programma di musica leggera con l'orchestra Arcangeli. Hanno cantato Silvana Fioresi, Oscar Carboni, Lina Termini e il trio Le Rondinelle. Mistica di un'alleanza. Conversazione di Italo Montanari.
Italia e Germania. Capisaldi di due civiltà. Nella vicenda dei secoli, ogni loro incontro imprime una svolta.
The clip you just saw is a sequence from Il Conformista, written in 1917 by Bernardo Bertolucci. To be precise, the clip is taken from the exact timings of 4 minutes and 0 seconds to 6 minutes and 6 seconds within the film. The main plot of the film goes as followed. Marcello Clerici, played by Jean-Louis Trident, is a member of the secret police in Mussolini's fascist Italy. He and his new bride, Giulia, played by Stefania Sandrelli, travel to Paris on their honeymoon, where Marcello also plans to assassinate his former college professor, Luca Quadri, played by Enzo D'Arascio, an outspoken anti-fascist living in exile. But when Marcello meets the professor's young wife, Anna, who is played by Dominique Sanda, both his romantic and his political loyalties are tested. Just to give you some contextual information about the film, beginning in the 1960s, Italy completed its post-war transformation from a largely agrarian, relatively poor country into one of the most economically and socially advanced countries of the world. After the Cold War ended in 1989, pressures for political and economic reform, European economic unification, and globalization exposed Italy to new ranges of challenges. The quote states, "The film brings together Bertolucci's Freudian and political preoccupations in an ironic study of pre-war Italy and an attempt to penetrate the mind of ordinary fascism." The film was proved to be one of the most influential post-war films, hindering importance on the war in Italy through the way Bertolucci looked back at the country's fascist past, with evidence of the aftermath of the 1968's failed utopian dreams. The theme of normality. Throughout the sequence, the discussion seems to be primarily based around the topic of women. As Clerici and Italo converse, they speak about why Clerici wants to get married to this woman, who she does indeed end up being his wife. And to answer Italo's question, Clerici talks about the idea of being normal and living a normalized life. This happens to be a reoccurring theme throughout the entirety of the film. Clerici, from a young age, had never had a normal life, and therefore it became something he craved for. The sexual assaults he experienced as a child and his unconscious sexuality and tendencies played a huge part into this. He aspired to live a normal life, and he planned on doing so by marrying a woman through the church, like the majority of people in those times, and serving as best as possible the leading fascist ways of Italy. In my opinion, Bertolucci chooses to highlight the idea of normal throughout the film in order to achieve a certain desired effect with the audience. This is because the normalization of life that Clerici wants can be suggested to be a significant representation of the period of time of war in Italy. Although the war had finished and taken its toll in Italy through the 1960s and 70s, the aftermath which remained in the country meant that as a whole nothing was the same. The citizens who experienced the fascist era in Italy wanted normalization as a means of feeling a sense of belonging again. The idea of normal first gets mentioned in this sequence, however, it definitely isn't the only time it gets mentioned or touched upon. Lighting as a technique. A quote states, Storaro is quoted as saying that he drew inspiration for the lighting from the Caravaggio painting La Vocazione di San Matteo, and explained its use of northern lighting to encompass the moral, political and spiritual journey of Marcello Clerici. This quote from offscreen.com begins to examine the lighting used throughout the film. It has been suggested that this painting and the examination of light within it, like the film, has been done to be a reflection of Clerici's consciousness and the darkness reflecting his unconscious or the repressed side of his identity, of which is then led to his sexuality, perhaps further used as a grand metaphor of the state of Italy under fascism. The lighting which is used in Caravaggio's painting is described as northern light. The manner and direction of the source light against the sharp contrast colours of the dark background. This precise lighting technique is mirrored in the frame with the film where Italo is standing alone in the basement. It's evident that throughout the film the lighting changes. For example, at the beginning of the film, before Marcello becomes part of the fascist movement, the lighting appears to be brighter, more light. As the film progresses and we watch Marcello become further involved in the fascist inner circle, the lighting tends to become darker and less naturalistic. Style, flashbacks. The film uses a non-linear stream of conscious flashback structure narrative, of which, at the beginning of the film, starts in Paris, 1938, with fascist agent Marcello Clerici meeting his chauffeur Magnanello, and ends at the fall of Mussolini towards the end of the war in 1943, weaving between events of Marcello's life, even going back to his childhood in 1917, where he relived a traumatic homosexual encounter with a chauffeur named Lino. But why does Bertolucci use flashbacks as a style? The use of flashback technique is done in order to give a further insight and understanding into a character's behaviour, or to bridge and answer things within the film that at the time seem unclear or confusing. It's a technique which requires the audience to pay close attention to, and furthermore could encourage rewatching the film in an attempt to fully understand it. Camera, angle and movements. In the sequence I've chosen, there are a number of different angles and the camera movements which are used, which I will begin to examine. The clip begins by zooming in onto Clerici, who is facing the opposite direction to the camera, therefore showing his back to us, and as we zoom in, the audience focus centralizes on the girls' singing group and the orchestra behind the glass window. After a few seconds, we hear a voice, and the camera angle cuts to Italo talking to Clerici. As the conversation progresses, the camera moves back to the initial shot, However, this time Clerici is facing the camera and answering Italo's questions. All meanwhile, the girls continue to sing in the background. This cutting of frame from Italo and Clerici continues throughout the conversation according to who is speaking at the time. Therefore, this can also be noted and referred to as a point of view shot. Suddenly, there is a cut to a close-up of the three girls singing as they, followed by a flash-forward close-up shot of Clerici in the car with Magnanello, which is based on dark blue and black tones and colours. A quick cut back to the ladies singing, and then suddenly a cut to the side-angle camera shot of Italo's office, where we see someone in the background poke their head in to inform Italo that there's 2 minutes left until it's time to go live on air, whilst Clerici stands in the foreground. As the door closes, Clerici turns around to face Italo once again, and the camera pans from Clerici to Italo as they converse. The panning then switches from Clerici and Italo to Clerici pacing from left to right of the room, all while speaking. It's a medium close-up shot of Italo, and also a point of view shot from Italo's perspective. There is then a tracking shot which follows Italo as he gets up from his desk and makes his way into the studio area, with some tilting backwards tracking too. The clip concludes with a shot of a medium close-up of Clerici watching Italo from behind the glass, and in the glass we see Italo's reflection. This final shot and frame of Clerici watching Italo in the studio can represent the differences between Italo's life and Clerici's life, further hindering upon the idea of normal and different. It's worth mentioning that the lighting in Italo's office constantly appears to be much darker than the lighting in the studio area. This difference in lighting could signify that Clerici's journey to becoming more normal had already begun. He has decided to follow the fascist ways and marry a woman, whereas the lighting in the studio could signify Italo's attempt to discourage and make understand the fact that everyone normally wants to be different and stand out, but Clerici instead wants to be the same and standard as everyone else. The contrast of lighting demonstrates Clerici's conflicting views and repressions of life. Mise en scène, prison. The quote says, Bertolucci uses shadows, bars, and the camera as a surveillance device, turning his canvas into a prison. Marcello spends a lot of his time throughout the film being followed by fascist henchmen who are shadowing him to ensure he carries out his orders and duties. This gives a sense of being trapped in an inescapable situation. Therefore, Bertolucci plays on this concept by using lighting, effects, shadows, and scenery through the film to bring this concept to life. Along with this, they deployed heavy contrasts of shadow and light to indicate Marcello's internal war with himself and the depth of his conscious and unconscious desires. The bigger metaphor of the imprisonment that felt to take place after the war in Italy. The frequent use of horizontal and vertical shadows, as well as barred windows, trees, and architecture, and occasionally little bars, all of which deepen the sense of imprisonment. Equally as important and reoccurring throughout the film is the film's visual aesthetic. The scenery and the mise en scene shows a variety of richly designs of fascist Italian architecture. In many shots, characters are framed in the centre of a large building or room or complex. Conclusion. In conclusion, Bertolucci has made cinema history with his works on Il Conformista, a story based on a negative perspective but filled with beautiful aspects and elements which allows viewers to enjoy film as an art. His controversial themes throughout are an aspect of desired normality in life, the metaphor between Clerici's consciousness and unconsciousness which reflects the state of Italy under fascism, the use of flashbacks to help us as viewers understand the depths of our main protagonist, Clerici, the distinct camera angles and movements which we are exposed to throughout, and finally the sensation and played-on effect of imprisonment through lighting, shadows, and Italian architecture. all of which done in an attempt to produce a piece of art that can be recognised and understood internationally, to try and give a deeper understanding about the life in Italy under fascist regime and Mussolini. Quote, Bernardo Bertolucci himself admitted that at the very beginning he was excited to be able to go back to a period where he started to love cinema, but with his visual work full of brilliant symbols made him reinvent cinema and up to a whole new level, while proving to be one of the most influential post-war films. In the end, as he claims, he wanted for his film to be a return of what poetry had given to him, an attempt to create a poem with a story to tell.